Mozambique journalist Paul Fauvet is in the capital, Maputo, and he now joins us on the line to share an update. Paul, a very good evening to you. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to The Globe.
Good evening.
Well, I know it's still too early, Paul, to quantify the extent and the scale of destruction, but what can you tell us at this point? What are you observing?
Well, the preliminary figures are on casualties are 1 person dead and 9 injured. This is very small when you compare it with the massive destruction caused by Cyclone Eloise in 2019. The cyclone came in early this morning and it flooded much of Beira, which is a low-lying city. Parts of it are below sea level. And lots of trees were uprooted, making travelling along the roads hazardous. Roofs were blown off houses in the poorer parts of the city. The authorities, municipal authorities, had time to organise evacuation from the worst-hit areas, from the areas which are known to be most flood-prone. People were evacuated and spent last night in sleeping in schools. The Beira port was closed because of the cyclone, as was the airport. No flights were allowed into the area affected by the cyclone.
Well, what are weather forecasters saying about the direction of the cyclone, and when is it expected to dissipate?
At the moment it's heading towards Zimbabwe. It's moved inland and it's losing strength. It came in, as you mentioned, about 160 kilometers an hour, but by now, as it passes across Meque province, it's down to about 50 kilometers an hour. And when it reaches Zimbabwe, it will dissipate. It will bring a lot of rain to Zimbabwe and indeed to parts of South Africa and even Botswana, but the cyclonic winds have died down.
So which areas have been affected the most? I heard that, the area is one where people live in informal settlements.
Well, yes. The cyclone came down, crossed northern Madagascar, and then came down the Mozambique Channel. It brushed against Zambezia province, causing torrential rain in the capital, Quelimane, and considerable damage there. And then it made landfall in and around Beira, and Beira took the brunt of the storm. You said informal settlements, yes, but that's the same with any city in Mozambique. Beira's specificity is that parts of it are below sea level. It's always vulnerable to flooding caused by storms and by high tides. And with the threat of sea level rise, there are people who wonder if Beira ought to be evacuated.
Well, as if the economic devastation of the economy was not enough. Clearly, the economy will be affected severely as a result of this storm. So what kind of impact will this have on the rural settlement and their economies?
Well, we don't. It's a bit early to say. The cyclone coincided with floods on the major rivers in Sofala, on the Buzi, the Pungwe, and the Save. These floods were not caused by the cyclone, but they coincided with it, and this will have an effect on agriculture in Sofala. A lot of crops will be washed out, and the transport situation is critical. At the moment, it's very difficult for people to move from central Mozambique because of problems with the bridge over the Save River.
Well, since the upcoming cyclone, which of course has downgraded to a storm, was announced by forecasters days before, do you get a sense that the government had given its citizens enough preparation in anticipation of this storm?
Oh yes, it certainly did, and it was all over the news, and nobody could say they weren't aware of it. And I think Beira, this is for a city, it's a municipal responsibility, and Beira City Council seemed to do a good job of alerting its citizens and of evacuating people from the most critical areas.
But did people take heed in anticipation of this storm?
Yes, they certainly did.
Okay.
They were filmed moving out. They were filmed moving all their goods from low-lying areas into schools on higher ground where they spent last night.
And in those areas where the storm has dissipated, are there any mop-up operations in progress?
Yes, people have to clear up the mess left on the streets of Beira. That too will be a municipal responsibility. In the flooded areas further inland, in the Boozy Valley, there are boats operated by the government doing search and rescue missions.
And aid agencies, especially for those submerged areas, how are they able to access those areas for purposes of providing aid to the affected residents?
Oh, in the flooded areas inland, they'll have to use boats.
Okay. All right, Mr. Paul Fauvet, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for giving us that update. All right, that was Mozambican journalist who was keeping a bird's eye view for us in Maputo in Mozambique.